Welcome to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. I'm Chris Evertsen. That's Charlie Frank, and you're listening to us live on KHTS AM 1220 FM 98.1. And of course, you can check us out wherever you download your favorite podcasts on Spotify and Apple Play. And of course, check out our social medias at The Speed Traveler. That's our Instagram, YouTube, and what have you. And in today's episode, Charlie, our featured marque, this is kind of cool, is Lexus.
Right.
We're going to talk a little bit about the Long Beach Grand Prix, where we just were this past weekend, the IndyCar race. And of course, we're going to preview or review, I guess, the Chinese Grand Prix that just happened. And of course, we have a whole bunch of other news. But and also, you know, it's kind of interesting. We're right now tracking some cars that we have on auction on Bring a Trailer.
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
I mean, we're literally doing that right now.
Yeah.
But Charlie, I guess maybe we should talk about a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Yeah, that's a good point, because people are always like, who are you guys? And what do you do?
Are you?
And why are you qualified to be talking about cars and race cars?
Well, we're first of all, we're completely unqualified.
But no, Chris and I have been race car driving since we were 16 years old, and we've grown up at the racetracks. And we're gonna. This leads to a story we're gonna talk about a little later, and that is in our next segment. We're gonna talk a little bit about sports car racing in the late 70s and early 80s, which we were growing up as kids then, and it was a great place for drug dealers to hide their money. So we're gonna get to that story in our next segment. And let's talk a little bit about today's show. After that, like you said, we're gonna talk a little bit about the Lexus and some Lexus models that we think are going to go up in value, which is always great to buy a car that goes up in value and not that goes down. I mean, trust me, we've bought and sold 200 cars. We bought lots of cars that have gone down in value. And of late, we've been getting a little smarter and been buying cars that actually go up in value.
Yeah, but we still kind of struggle. I mean, like we mentioned, we have a couple cars on Bring a Trailer, and one's looking really good.
Yeah.
And the other was like,
yeah,
I don't know, man. Do we need to just kind of outbid everyone and just take it back for ourselves?
Right? The no reserve, the evil no reserve curse. Like, it depends on the day of the week.
Yeah, it really does.
But Bring a Trailer does a good job. That it, as the name implies, back in the day, it meant bring a trailer because the car doesn't run.
Or might not. You have no idea what you might get. One of the wheels might be a cinder block.
Right. And it started as a fun, I think it was just a fun little passion of the gentleman that started the company. And it's become this incredible marketplace where they sell 600 or 700 cars a month now.
Yeah, and they've grown with that, though. I mean, from just throwing it up there, a barn project, if you will, and throwing something up there. Now it's rather professional. I mean, they send out a photographer, they kind of go through the whole process on the car, check it all out.
Yep.
So I mean, it's very, very, very thorough.
Yeah, I agree. Very thorough. But you know what? Let's get back to the show. So we're gonna. In our next segment, we're gonna talk a little bit about 70s and 80s sports car racing and the infamous people that were involved that were laundering money.
An iconic era of sports car motor racing in general, and it was kind of a no holds barred generation of racing.
And then, as Chris mentioned, in the next segment, we're going to talk about the Lexus, which is our featured marque today. In our final segment, we're going to talk Formula One and all the crazy things that happened at the Grand Prix of China last weekend. But since this is our first segment, Chris, why don't you tell people where they can find us if they want to see some of our videos, and maybe about what videos we have up on the YouTube channel.
Well, you can find us right here, right now. I'm sitting in this chair and you're sitting in that chair. But we have, we do have a fun YouTube channel. We sometimes do some live videos. We upload all of our Cars and Coffee events up at YouTube, and the channel there is The Speed Traveler. Of course, if you want some quick updates, you can always check us out on Instagram. Again, it's at The Speed Traveler. We also have a very pedestrian website.
Yeah.
We're old school and we kind of think websites are still important, but we really don't do anything with it. But you can also message us there. I mean, we do have our email addresses there, and we don't have our phone numbers there, thank God. But you can pretty much find us at The Speed Traveler on any of your social media accounts, and also on your favorite podcast networks, wherever you download your favorite podcasts. I actually saw one of our episodes on Spotify the other day, and I was actually pretty impressed with how many people actually listened to the show.
Yeah,
exactly. Unlike that short story of being at the Las Vegas Grand Prix, where we ran into our one fan, which, what a fluke that was.
Oh my God,
that was hilarious.
Amazing.
That was hilarious.
But and back to who we are and what we do. As I started to say, we are race car drivers. We won the U.S. Touring Car Championship last year, and we do automotive events as our main job during the day. And we do lots of fun adventures. We make great videos about reviewing cars, reviewing old cars, things like that. But it's funny, I find it hard. Since we're on K-Hits Radio at the moment, they said the biggest dig on the former presidential candidate, Tim Scott, who seems like a great guy,
right,
was that he hates talking about himself. And I sort of feel the same way.
Yeah.
I feel like people are like, well, we want to know who you guys are, but I don't really want to talk about,
neither of us
myself.
Neither of us are very boisterous about our personalities and what we do. We're not chest thumpers by any sense of the imagination.
Right. I think we need to be a little more chest thumpers.
Yeah. Well, honestly, we just need to bring someone else in to thump our chest for us. Yeah. It's like, because I almost get embarrassed.
I know. It's
really almost get embarrassed.
It's very embarrassing.
Contrary to our personalities, we do have kind of, gregarious personalities, but I'm actually quite bashful. We're both quite bashful when it comes to speaking about ourselves. So, And actually, you mentioned that we did win the United States Touring Car Championship in 2023. We are the defending champions there.
Yep.
And we are only doing part of the schedule this year, but that's mainly because we're building some new chassis.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of excited about that part.
Oh, yeah. You can. I like to call it a rebuilding season.
Yes.
Like in the NFL, when you're doing when the teams aren't doing well, they're like, we're in a rebuilding phase, right?
Or in basketball terms, this is a perpetual New York Knicks season.
Rebuilding, or New York Jets.
The Jets too for football. Why is New York so crappy? They haven't been good since Manning.
Yeah,
Eli Manning was there.
The biggest commercial, the biggest commercial rights in the entire series or franchise, and they can never make it work. I guess the Yankees. It's the only they can only hang their hat on the Yankees.
They really at this moment, and even that is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, Yeah, agreed.
Geez, did we just switch the show from the Speed Traveler Road Show to the Speed Traveler Sports Show?
The Speed Traveler Sports Show. I like that.
Motor racing is a sport. So, those guys are tremendous athletes. When you look at what like the Formula One drivers do for training, when you're pulling, like as an Air Force pilot or, Formula One drivers and IndyCar drivers, when you're pulling 6 Gs in a turn, you have to be incredibly fit.
Right.
Your body, your muscle core is always on. So you have to be incredibly fit. So make no mistake, motor racing sports is definitely a sport.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
I agree. It's hard. And then on top of it, not only is it really physically demanding, but you need 100% concentration.
Yes.
You have to focus there's no like walking from the 17th green to the 18th tee where you got a little walk in there. Like you have to be on the entire race.
Non-stop. Yeah. And you can, those moments are captured in an instantaneous moment.
Yeah.
We saw in Australia, George Russell not so much lose focus, but the things changed around him very, very quickly.
Right.
And he crashed.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the Chinese Grand Prix and one of the probably top 10 saves of the decade. Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin went off and on full throttle. And this is a car that has 1,000 horsepower, incredibly light, and incredibly difficult to drive, and pulls off a massive save on the front straightaway.
It was unbelievable.
And that's that focus we're talking about. You always have to be on focus.
Yeah. So we are going to talk about F1 in the last segment, but real quick to sum up sort of what we do. So what we found when buying and selling so many cars is there are some keys to actually making money on your next car. Like the worst thing you could really do is buy a new car. I mean, I know that's a bummer to a lot of people that love new cars.
Yeah.
But that's the best way to lose money. I've got a niece right now who is in an Audi payment, and she's upside down $12,000 with, and she still has I think a year and a half to pay on the car. So that's such a bummer. But we want you to avoid being in those situations. So one thing that we found is a constant is if you buy a car and low in a depreciation cycle, that's the best way to do it. So you could, if we're talking about exotic cars, it might be $180,000 today. In 10 years, it's going to be $70,000. And then it's going to start to go back up again in value. And people are like, well, I don't have, I can't buy a exotic car. Well, that's okay. You can buy a 6-year-old car and get a warranty,
Right. You can get like an extended warranty through like Toco or something like that. It's not
Toco,
insane.
Car insurance. That's a good point. It's like $100 or less a month. And someone else has lost all that, has suffered all that depreciation.
Right.
But the other thing is, what I like to say is that if you have a main daily driver, like let's say you have a 5-year-old Toyota and you're cool with driving that lot, have your fun car in the garage that you don't put a lot of miles on.
Right.
And the fun car in the garage, if it's a manual, if you drive manuals, manual cars are really going up in value. The fun car in the garage doesn't need to lose value. As a matter of fact, it should go up every year.
It really. Oh my goodness, are we already done with those cookies? And I want to add to the luxury, or I should say, the performance supercar type used car. And a good example though of a cost effective supercar, I guess it would fall in the supercar category right now. Is the Ferrari Mondial. Yeah. It's not an expensive car at the moment. I mean, you can probably find a decent one for around $50K.
Yeah.
And if you just keep it in good nick, I'm not saying don't use it. Definitely use the cars. Yeah. Cars that are driven and well maintained definitely do better than cars that are just parked in a closet or parked in a garage.
I agree.
But that's, again, it's a $50,000 spend. It is a Ferrari. It's going to require a higher degree of maintenance. But, that depreciation cycle you're talking about, it's usually about a 10 to 15-year-old car that's gone down to probably its lowest point if it's not going to plummet into chaos like a Daihatsu or something like that.
Right.
But, you can look at a fun car that I like looking at right now, and I always bring this up, but is almost any BMW.
Right.
And right now the E90 chassis is one of those chassis that seems to have gone down to its lowest point, and you can pick them up fairly cheaply. Bearing in mind, you can find one for about $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 that's in okay shape. But if you only drop about another $3,000 in there for under $6K, you have a great fun car to play with. Agreed. And something that'll go up in value.
Yeah,
as long as you maintain it well.
You find a manual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In the 4-door manual, I mean, it sounds a little odd because it's not the sporty-ish one, but not the sportiest version.
Not the sportiest version. That's a good point. Yeah.
But the 4-door manual are so rare, and 4-door wagons.
And a wagon
in a manual, it's only going to go up in value. And what's cool about the wagons is it has functionality. It's got room in the back for stuff, and
it's a rad car. I was just looking on I forget what the site was, but I was just looking at a 2003, I think it was, E46 3 Series wagon.
Yeah.
And it was well maintained, and it was only $4,000. And I figure, and I looked at it, and I figured I would need to put about $2,500 into it.
Right.
And it would be in almost perfect nick.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you get a used car like that, one of the first things you should really do is get it detailed and put on a clear wrap.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper than painting it,
yeah.
but it preserves especially if it's original color.
Right.
That's a great way to save a car for a longer period of time without repainting it, because repainting sometimes devalues a car.
Yeah. All right, we better take our first break, Chris. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio. KHTS, yeah, that's right. KHTS Radio, and we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about the International Marijuana Smugglers Association, better known as IMSA Sports Car Racing. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. I'm Chris Evertsen. That's Charlie Frank, and you're listening to us live on KHTS AM 1220 FM 98.1. Of course, available wherever you download your favorite podcasts, and of course on all the social media networks at the Speed Traveler. And Charlie, I'm actually really excited about this segment. We're going to get into IMSA racing.
Ooh, and it's timely because we were just at the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach last weekend, and the headliner of their Saturday program is the IMSA race, who was won by Sebastian Bourdais.
Sebastian Bourdais and his teammate Van der Zandt for Chip Ganassi Racing in the GTP category. And of course, pertinent to this episode is Jimmy Vasser and Sully Sullivan's team with, I already forgot the drivers. Why am I blanking on that so badly? With Dan Benincourt and Parker Thompson driving the Lexus to a victory in the GTD category.
Oh yeah, GT Daytona category. And it's funny because Lexus is our featured marque today, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Vasser, for those of you who don't know, was 96, 97 IndyCar champion, all around great dude. He was partners with our mentor, Kevin Kalkoven, who is the owner of the Long Beach Grand Prix. And Jimmy has a great winery called V12.
Yeah, and he's got a great partner in the current team in Sully Sullivan.
Yep.
You know, a Texas businessman who's just been a part of the motor racing scene for a long, long time. And I really love what they've done over there with their IMSA racing program and the Lexus race car that they're using. I mean, it's surprising when they first brought out the Lexus race car. I was like, wow, really, Lexus? So, you know, I mean, it was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, it's always been Corvette, Camaro, Mustang, Porsche. You know, it's and when Lexus tipped their hat into the arena, they immediately garnered success with this Vasser Sullivan racing team.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is Lexus has been in there before. If you recall, in the early 2000s, they had the IS 300 race car program.
That's true.
It was the lower formula. It wasn't the Daytona 24-hour, full IMSA. It was more of the Speed Vision
touring car.
Touring car series. Exactly. So they've been involved, but you're right. This has been a great program, and it's cool that Jimmy Vasser is a part of it. He's as we mentioned, great dude.
And not to totally tell the story of what we're going to talk about along with that, but they have been winning races without their roll cages full of gasoline or cocaine.
So what Chris is talking about is we have some interesting stories. So IMSA is the series that was the sports car racing series that was racing at Long Beach last weekend. They raced at the 24 Hours of Daytona. They raced at the 12 Hours of Sebring. And interestingly, they race at the end of the year at the Les Petits Le Mans, which is at the Road Atlanta circuit. So in the late 1970s...
You know, I have to interrupt. What a great way, Charlie, to kind of story tell that right into Road Atlanta. That was awesome. I was very impressed by that.
So they're in the late 70s. I don't know why IMSA racing became a mecca of marijuana smugglers. And for some weird reason, it really wasn't cocaine smugglers.
No.
It was marijuana smugglers, which seems kind of silly now. You know, what are we, 40 years later? You can buy it on every corner and every storefront in the world. But believe it or not, back in the late 70s, marijuana smuggling was illegal. So for some reason, I don't know if one of the drivers got involved and then his buddies all started getting involved, but there was a family called the Paul family, and it was John Paul Sr. and John Paul Jr. And John Paul Sr. was racing in the Trans Am series in 1977. And he would come out with these amazing brand new cars. He bought a Greenwood Corvette, which wasn't cheap at the time. Ironically, those cars today are insanely expensive, but at the time, I was just saying, go ahead. At the time, he had a Greenwood Corvette. And then it seemed like 3 months later, he didn't like the way the Greenwood Corvette. So then he had a brand new Porsche 935. Then he had a Chevy Monza. Then he had 3 different Formula Fords for his,
not suspicious at all.
I guess it was the era of ask no questions.
Yeah.
But so he was one of the big drug smugglers that was involved in sports car racing in the late 70s. Then along came the Whittington brothers. And these guys basically went from racing showroom stock cars for, I don't know, I think they had done 4 or 5 races to racing Le Mans cars. And for those of you who don't know, that is a big step.
That's a huge step. Well, also it's a huge step. I mean, like today's cars all have these management systems,
Right.
you know, ABS, anti-lock braking systems, traction control, stability management,
Yep.
you know, engine mapping that you can do in the car.
Right.
Back then there was 3 pedals
Yeah.
and 1,000 horsepower.
Oh, God.
1,000 plus horsepower.
So these brothers came along that were in the aviation business, and they got involved in the drug trade, and they were and made this huge splash in racing. They went literally from racing the most amateur races you could race to racing in the premier sports car series in the world at the time.
Right.
And I guess I gotta give those guys credit, because we've been race car drivers our whole lives. That would be like someone learning to play baseball, hitting
Little League.
yeah, and then going to the MLB and facing guys that throw 100 miles an hour in 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable that they really
unbelievable.
must have been.
They were
sadly,
talented.
They were very talented.
They were talented drivers. I was
Yeah.
going to add to that, because they were definitely absolutely talented drivers, because you can't just jump in a car like that.
No.
And 2 things: drive the car well,
Right.
and B, the second part is drive that car well in traffic.
Right.
You know, and that's where the skill sets lies. Doing a lapping day is great. You learn how to drive a car,
Right.
but it's much different when you're out there battling with 30, 40
Totally.
other cars all going for that same 15-foot piece of real estate.
Yeah, it's like and that's why we love racing. It's like a chess match.
Yeah.
And you have to, as we were saying earlier, you have to focus if it's an hour and a half race, you have to focus 100% for that 90 minutes. You don't, I mean, maybe if there's a yellow flag, you know, you get a little time to a little time off. But if there's no yellow flag, you got to focus the whole time. So the Whittington brothers came along and they started blowing money like crazy.
Like crazy.
And they were these iconic yellow Porsche 935s. And all it said on the side was Whittington. Brothers. There was no sponsors. Apparently they got a little clue later, and they made up a phony cologne company, and they put the name of their phony cologne that sold like 10 bottles of cologne.
Right.
They put that on the side. But
they were savvy businessmen.
They were
absolutely savvy businessmen.
Yeah.
And I think the part that you're going to lead into next is that they ended up acquiring.
Oh, I was going to talk about Le Mans first.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
So in the 1979 Le Mans 24-hour race, they came along, and they were they hadn't really been racing very long, and they went to the most, I guess the biggest sports car race in the world,
and
Le Mans,
and the absolute most demanding sports car race in the world. It's the longest track on the circuit. You know, people do the 24 hours of Daytona, 24 hours of Sebring, or 12 hours of Sebring. But these are kind of closed course tracks, and Daytona's a fairly smooth track. Sebring's a very, very, notoriously and infamously bouncy track. But Le Mans is, the Mulsanne Straight is, at that time, there was no kinks in the straightaway. And I mean, they're pulling max speed for what seems like forever. You get a sense of that. There was a great movie called Ford vs. Ferrari. And you get a great sense of what that was like, just ripping at 200 plus miles an hour and coming into what is a very tight complex at the end of that. Yeah. So,
and as you were saying, I mean, it separates the men from the boys, or the girls from the women, or whatever you have to say today that's politically correct.
Yeah. Just a driver from the elite drivers to the not elite drivers.
It was no joke. The cars down the Mulsanne Straight, as you just mentioned, there was no kinks. It was 3 miles long, the straightaway. And the cars, the Porsche 935s at the time, were hitting about 238, almost 240 miles an hour. There's a forest on either side of you, basically.
Right.
I mean, if you just bobble the wheel a little, you're done.
You're toast. And again, this goes back to that era. Safety third.
Yeah.
was pretty much lightweight and fast.
Yeah.
Was first and second.
Yeah.
And safety was absolutely third.
Yeah.
And in the case of the Whittington brothers, they took it a step further. One of the things they did at Le Mans was the roll cage, and this is totally illegal to do, but to stay out on track longer and not have those long pit stops, the roll cage was actually filled with gasoline and acted as a secondary gas fuel cell.
Right.
Which, yeah, imagine that, tumbling down, hitting the trees along the Mulsanne Straits. That'd be just an absolute fireball.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a very effective trick,
yeah.
To stay out on track longer. I mean, I can't recall exactly how much fuel they were able to carry in the roll cage.
But even 4 gallons would lead to another lap or two.
A whole lap.
And when you equate that over 24 hours, it's maybe 2 less pit stops. Each pit stop back in the day, they were long.
Yeah.
Because it took them a long time to refuel the cars. So they probably say, man, that went fast.
God. Well, I mean, we're liking this subject, and I say let's just keep rolling with it.
Yeah.
I mean, to that. So Le Mans, idea more to add on Le Mans?
No, I was to say, why don't we take a break and we'll come back and do a big cliffhanger and make people come back
and
listen.
A cliffhanger.
Yeah. But this is the Speed Traveler Roadshow. Come on back and join us in a minute. We're going to wrap up the story on the 1979 Le Mans 24 Hours.
Welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. That's Charlie Frank. I'm Chris Evertsen. You're listening to us live on KHTS AM 1220 FM 98.1. And just look at us at the Speed Traveler and all the social media and podcast networks. And we're going to dive right back into our 70s IMSA racing storyline. Charlie was just talking about what was going on in the 1977 Le Mans 24-hour race.
1979.
79, excuse me. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And also, how that pertains to the Whittington brothers, who are a subject matter of this segment. And where were you? I actually.
So we were talking about the Whittington brothers came along. They were in the marijuana import business, and
among other things.
Yeah, among other things, they were pilots, so it worked perfectly for them. So they were able to fly marijuana from, I guess, Mexico, Colombia, wherever into the States, because they already had an existing aviation business, and then they burst onto the IMSA motor racing scene and went from driving amateur class cars to leading at the 1979 Le Mans 24 Hours. So there's a great story. Before we move on. So they were racing for the all conquering at the time Kramer racing team. And the Whittington brothers went to Le Mans, and they were smart. They got a great German driver named Klaus Ludwig to be their co-driver.
An absolute character in the paddock. Klaus Ludwig. I mean, that guy was funny. That guy, funny. Yeah. I mean, so charismatic and an incredible driver.
Incredible driver. So they were smart. They brought in one of the best drivers at the time.
But it was actually key.
Yeah,
because because that's how they actually were allowed to drive in the race.
Yeah,
they needed that professional co-driver. They're actually told no.
Yeah, because they were amateurs.
Yeah.
So they sponsored the car. They brought in a ton of money. By the way, if you want to see the car, it's sitting over at the Peterson Auto Museum. It's the number 41 Porsche 935 here in Los Angeles. You go to the Peterson Auto Museum and go see that exact car from that race. But so they were told no, as you said. They brought in Klaus Ludwig, and they hired the Kramer brothers, who had the most professional team at the time. So they spent all this money to get there, and granted, it was all drug money. And the Kramer, the Kramer brothers were like, okay, we're gonna put Klaus Ludwig in the car first to get us out. And the Whittingtons were like, well, wait a second. What happens if Klaus Ludwig crashes the car in the first segment? And the Kramer brothers were like, well, then, we retire the car and we're done. And the Whittington brothers were like, well, wait a second. No. Like, we're spending whatever it was, $300,000.
They're floating the whole bill.
For the whole
They're
thing.
floating the whole bill.
Yeah. And I think it was Bill Whittington was like, I want to drive the car first. And then my brother, and then Klaus, we could get in. And the Kramer brothers were like, no. This is our team. This is what we do. So Bill Whittington said, okay, I'm going to tell you how we're going to settle this. Go to my van that's parked in the paddock area. He's like, there's a duffel bag in the front seat. He's like, go there and take the duffel bag and it's yours. So Mr. Kramer goes to the van. opens the duffel bag, and it's stuffed full of cash. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. He walks back to the Whittington brothers and said, "Okay, you guys are starting." So they started the race. Their biggest competitor of that race was none other than Paul Newman,
the legendary Paul Newman,
in the Dick Barber Racing Hawaiian Tropic car.
Oh.
So they battled it out with, I mean, we should do a whole show on Paul Newman.
Right.
And our buddy Adam Carolla over in Glendale, he's dying to make a movie about this. He did make a movie about Paul Newman.
Paul Newman, probably the best documentary, racing documentary ever.
Yeah, I agree. And we should have Adam Carolla on, because he would love to talk about this.
It's called Winning.
Yeah.
And you can find it, I believe, wherever you download your favorite movies and whatnot, but definitely check out the Paul Newman story called Winning by Adam Carolla. It's absolutely a must watch if you're into motorsports. It's also a must watch if you're into documentaries about famous people.
Yeah. And so back to the 79 Le Mans. So it was Paul Newman versus the drug dealer Whittington brothers. Paul Newman led most of the race, his team, and he did a lot of the driving. And he had a little $2 part that failed in the last hour, and that allowed the Whittington brothers to win. So pretty crazy history.
But wait, you're underselling it. Whittington brothers won the race in their first throw.
Unbelievable.
You know, I mean, you watch Ford versus Ferrari, it took Ford a few years, 5 years to actually get that victory. And they had to throw a lot more money than the Whittington brothers did it. And the Whittington brothers came and did it. You know, now they were smart. Like you said, they got the Kramer brothers to the best team in the paddock.
Right.
One of the best teams in the paddock. They had Klaus Ludwig as the co-driver,
right.
but they drove that car to victory.
Yeah.
You know, so truly an incredible story.
No, it really is. And I believe Rolf Stolleman, I'm checking right now, was in the Paul Newman car in 1975, along with Dick Barber.
Dick Barber.
Chris and I were at Riverside Raceway. I think it was in 1983. And Rolf Stolleman was driving a Porsche 935, similar to the one that they used at Le Mans, and the rear wing broke
off on the back straightaway. We happened to be standing right there at the entrance into turn 9, and the rear wing came off the back of of his race car. And not only did it eliminate all the downforce, because of the angle, it actually lifted the car off the ground. And Rolf Stolleman, unfortunately, to his personal demise, went straight into the barrier at the entrance into turn 9 at full throttle, which was probably about 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So a devastating blow, not only for my eyes, because I watched the whole thing. Right. We watched the whole thing, but a devastating blow to the racing community and the Riverside International Raceway at the time.
Yeah, it really was, wasn't it? Because it was such a bummer. But back to the we got to wrap up this story.
We got to go to Road Atlanta. So the Whittington brothers, they didn't know they had all this cash. They didn't know what to do with it. They had to spend it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a funny movie out called Air America with Tom Cruise, and it's kind of funny in how he kind of had to bury all these piles of money everywhere.
Right.
And the Whittington brothers were kind of in that same boat. And so one of the things they did, and it was genius for their business, but it was also genius for spending the money, is they bought Road America Racetrack, Atlanta Racetrack, which conveniently had one of at the time, the longest straightaway in the U.S., which just so happens to be long enough to be in a runway.
Yeah.
So what their boys would do is they would fly two planes in, one on top of the other.
Right.
They'd go low altitude. One would land on the front straightaway, and the other one would continue. And that way, thus avoiding radar detection for the second aircraft.
Yeah.
And then they'd park all their drugs. Yeah. And also then they did the same thing to get another aircraft all the ground loaded with cash or whatever they're doing.
Leaving to go to South America wasn't as big a deal. It was coming back.
But that's how they also did some distribution. So exactly. I mean, it was pivotal. But then.
Oh, wait, let me just add one thing though, just along those lines that you're talking about the planes, is that it wasn't tracking wasn't what it is today. So in 1981 or whatever it was, a plane flying just underneath another plane on the radar looks like one plane.
Yes.
And then you could land one plane on the back straightaway at Road Atlanta Raceway. The other plane goes on to Atlanta International Airport. and it looks like one plane.
Yeah, and
It's
when
pretty
that
ingenious.
when that plane at the international airport was searched,
Yeah,
they would
there's
find
nothing on
nothing.
it.
There's
Yeah.
nothing there. They'd never find anything. But then, to their genius and then ultimate demise, all of a sudden, all of the concession stands
Right.
at the racetrack, the concession
Started making
millions of dollars a race,
Yeah.
and that's how they laundered a lot of their cash.
Yeah.
And we're kind of telling a lot of the story. And I know Adam Carolla really wants to do a movie, a documentary about the Whittington brothers, and we'll include all that.
Right.
And so another great reason to have Adam Carolla on the show.
But getting back to just to put a bow on the Whittington brothers story. So they had this racetrack in Atlanta, and they did promote there was a big race every year there, at the big IMSA race. But I think what happened is as you said, the concessionaires were doing this. They were making millions of dollars on paper,
on potato chips and pretzels.
And it took a clever IRS agent to be like, well, wait a second, something doesn't add up here. They were apparently keeping the marijuana that was coming in transporters in an area that was out of bounds or no one could go. But apparently there was an aroma of marijuana that would permeate the entire part of the circuit. So they figured it out. The Whittington brothers did go to jail. One of them did much more time than the others. There was 3 brothers. I think one of them recently passed away in an airplane accident.
Crash,
and it went on. There was Tico and Renee. There was Randy Lanier. There was all these other guys that were drug dealing at the time. And I'd say about the mid 80s, what was the Mrs. Reagan's war on drugs?
Oh yeah.
They really kind of put an end to it, probably about 1985.
They did. Well, I mean, the IRS got savvy. The Reagan administration increased the ability and capacity of the IRS.
Yeah.
And also they utilized the FBI and a number of other organizations to ultimately shut down the Whittington Brothers project. And, and a quick aside on this, and I think it's so apropos, a friend of mine who recently passed away, she had a really cool Whittington Brothers Porsche. It was all yellow, and it was from 1979. I don't know if you recall, but like they used to make like model cars or other trophies and things, and then it would be filled with like booze.
Yeah.
So even their their products were in a quote smuggling contraband.
I love it.
A little toy car full of I don't know, whiskey or something like that.
So and then the Paul family, sadly, John Paul Jr. passed away here at UCLA not that long ago. His dad allegedly murdered somebody. They went out on a boat. It was his ex-girlfriend or something, and she disappeared. And allegedly he moved on and had a dive shop in somewhere in the South Pacific, and no one ever found him.
Yeah.
But his car is for sale right now at Canepa. Canepa is it's Kanepa.
Yep.
Canepa is a historic race car refurbisher and retailer. John Paul Sr.'s Greenwood Corvette is for sale right now at his shop.
Such a cool car. That's such a cool car.
But why don't we take a break? We're going to run out of time, and we could talk about that all day long.
I know.
But we need to take a break. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Speed Traveler Roadshow. That's Charlie Frank. I'm Chris Evertsen. You're listening to us live on KHTS AM 1220 FM 98.1. And available wherever you download your favorite podcast. And in this segment, we argue about EV cars. Oh, wait. We're not going to do that this time.
For once, we're not going to argue about EV mandates.
EV mandates. Actually, I'm pretty excited about this because we're going to talk about Lexus. Okay. That's our marquee car for the day, for the episode. And it's appropriate because we talked about Jimmy Vasser the Vasser-Sullivan Racing Team winning the GTD race at the recent Long Beach Grand Prix in this exact car we're going to talk about, the Lexus RCF. And it's interesting, Lexus is not one of those brands that I've always found to be at the top of my list.
Right. Performance car wise.
However, Consumer Reports has the Lexus brand as the #1 consumer rated car of all 30 primary brands that are out there, beating all of them,
Yeah.
including Toyota.
Yeah. No,
You know,
it's
so
pretty amazing. We were looking, you mentioned the Lexus RS F 2015 to 2024. They don't come in manual. We love manual cars, but for 45 to 50 grand, that's for an older one, let's say a 2016.
right.
You're buying a really reliable car that has 470 horsepower.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's a cool looking car.
It's a great, it actually, I mean, it is one of the sexier cars out there. I've always appreciated their kind
Yeah.
of Darth Vader
Yeah.
grill.
And along those lines, the sister car to that is the LC 500.
Right.
Uh,
2000 available to,
same range,
same
right,
range.
right, same range. Those cars have that's the 2-door one. It's really sleek and cool. They're a little more expensive. We saw one this morning that was about 5 or 6 years old, and that was 67,000.
Right.
But what a beautiful car with a ton of power.
Ton of power. I mean, and they again, they look really good. But then, that said, you can even get a new RCF for about 90 grand.
Yeah.
And that's a
Finance
very,
it if you want.
finance if you want, but it's a lot of car
Right.
for what you're getting, and it's super reliable. It's super sporty, a lot of power. I mean, it's got a V8 engine in there.
Yeah.
And I love that. And to put that in comparison, one of our all-time favorite cars, the Corvette.
Yeah.
It's very competitive against that car.
And it's a beautiful package, beautiful styling, and it's going to be very reliable. Let's talk about the older ones. We're talking about cars that will go up in value.
Right.
But these are really economical cars. The 2001 to 2005 IS 300 in a manual.
Right.
Don't get it in an automatic. But if you buy that car in a manual, they only had about 200 horsepower, a little more. But what a great car.
But what a fun car to drive.
Yeah.
In the manual. And honestly, this is one of those cars where I say it's, I mean, you and I are very manual,
Right.
skewed to the manual transmission system. And it's a lot more fun. It's a much more hands-on and tactile form of driving.
Right.
But in this case, the automatic is not a horrible car to get, because I think with the endurance that the Lexus car has,
Right.
with its ease of maintenance and its very low volume of maintenance,
Yeah.
the automatic is a great way to go, especially for maybe a first time
Right.
buyer looking to get something fun,
Yeah.
that might appreciate in the future.
Agreed.
I think that this is the case where the automatic is not as hugely a determining factor.
Yeah, I agree. But IS 300 and the 2006 and on IS 250, great little cars. They're inexpensive. They're 20 grand or so, and probably for sure the manual's gonna go up in value.
Oh yeah.
So if you can deal with a manual, maybe it's your second car. That's the way to go. But let's talk about Formula One real quick before we run out of time. The Formula One Grand Prix circuit was in China last week. And, tell us a little bit about the race, Chris.
Well, I mean, first of all, it was the first sprint race of the season.
Right.
And we talked about this when we were at La Opera for the IndyCar event.
Right.
And we thought that they had somehow changed back to an old version of the qualifying. And they, in fact, do have the qualifying system where it's individual qualifying for the sprint race and then individual qualifying for the Grand Prix itself. And jumping right into, I don't even want to go into the schmozzle that was the sprint race. Let's go right to the main race. And I was, first of all, Red Bull 1-2 at the line.
Right.
They qualified 1-2. Not surprising, but for me and my pick of the race, Fernando Alonso qualified third.
Right.
And that was huge in my mind. I was like, okay, I think I made a really good pick there.
Yeah.
But the McLarens were right behind him.
Yep.
And your boy,
Yeah,
Lando Norris, quite frankly, for me, I think the drive of the day,
absolutely, up to second,
put that car on the podium, P2, splitting the Red Bulls. Now Sergio Perez had a little bit of misfortune in the timing, the way the pits kind of ended up happening.
Yep.
But with Red Bull going 1-3 and Lando Norris taking that second spot on the podium.
Yeah.
What a great result from McLaren.
I agree. And we called it. There's a lot of straightaway at the circuit in China. And we called it because the McLaren had been fast at these tracks that are wide open like Silverstone.
Right.
So we had an idea that they were going to be up there, and they were. Just a quick shout out for the Ferrari team was decent race pace. They came in 4th and 5th. And Nico Hulkenberg in the American F1 team Haas has that Ferrari engine, and he got 10th, so he scored another point.
Scored another point. I mean, God, you gotta love the Hulkenberg. You gotta love the Hulk. I mean, he's just a character. He's a fun driver. So really good race.
They're gonna move on to Grand Prix of Miami, so they're coming stateside soon. But let us know what happened at Long Beach Grand Prix, the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach.
Well, Charlie, the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach, as we'll say over and over again, is one of our favorite races of the year. We had so much fun at L'Opera Restaurant, talking to a whole bunch of interesting folks. The racing action out on track was super exciting. We talked a little bit about the IMSA race previously with Bourdais and Van der Zandt winning in the GTP,
right.
And then the Sullivan-Vassar team winning with the Lexus in the GTD race.
Right.
But in the IndyCar race itself, man, Scott Dixon, that wily old veteran from Chip Ganassi Racing, strategically moved that car from a very poor qualifying position all the way to P1.
Yeah, and what was really exciting was second place was Colton Herta right here from Valencia, California. He went to West Ranch High School, got into second.
Oh, yeah, with a little bit of controversy there. Joseph Newgarden, who was in second place at the time, the top three, Dixon, Newgarden, Colton Herta, were running 1, 2, 3 in the race. And in the hairpin, the Lowe's hairpin, as he used to be called, Colton Herta got into the rear end of Scott Dixon's car, Chip Ganassi car, Joseph Newgarden's, got into the back of Joseph Newgarden, the Penske car, and the car went into anti-stall, which pushed Newgarden to about 5th place. Yeah. And Colton Herta was able to get a very, very pivotal result for the Andretti Racing team
in his home race. But with that said, Chris, we are out of time. If you're a gearhead and you're a racing person, you want to hear a lot more about racing, check out the Speed Traveler F1 Deep Dive. You could see that anywhere you get your podcast, or you can hear it. You could see it if you want on our YouTube channel, which is the Speed Traveler. We'll be back next week, Chris. That was a fun show. This is the Speed Traveler Roadshow on KHTS Radio.